My first small look into the Collectathon genre was with the interactive CD Sampler Disc Volume 8. That's a mouthful. I played it when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Spyro the Dragon was the first option on the disc when booting it up, and Spyro was awesome because dragons were the most awesome mythical creatures.
Thank you for releasing me.
In a few years' time, on 2 different occasions, my dad bought Spyro Enter the Dragonfly and Spyro Hero's Tale, which were my first dive into the genre, but these were soon overshadowed. When I was about 9, I got to play the original Spyro PS1 trilogy on my brother's PlayStation 3. If the previous Spyro games were a first dive, then this was my voyage into the genre. Playing the Spyro trilogy is what solidified Spyro as something special, even if I couldn't explain what made the game so unique. Most recently, I was playing the Spyro Reignited trilogy in my spare time, which led to me thinking about the Collectathon genre as a whole, and I realized I had no clue why it was a genre. The Collectathon genre isn't commonly talked about, but to catch you up to speed, some of the most cited games within the genre are 1996's Super Mario 64, 98's Banjo-Kazooie, also 98's Spyro the Dragon, 99's Donkey Kong 64, and 2017's A Hat in Time. I had been aware of the Collectathon label for some time from YouTubers, but I went digging into the web to see if I could understand it better. I was surprised how hard it was to find a good description for the genre. They usually said collecting to make progress, which is too vague and leaves the door open for nearly any game ever made to be a Collectathon, from Dark Souls to Hitman.
Thanks, don't get too...
The issue was pretty clear to me. If everything is a Collectathon, then nothing is. I had to figure out a way to make the genre more understandable and exclusive, otherwise how could I even examine games in the genre if every game was a part of it? Now, as far as I can tell, genres show up after a game becomes very popular. For instance, FPS games. They weren't much of a genre staple until id Software made Wolfenstein 3D, and then of course Doom. These ended up being copied and used as inspiration for other game devs who made different FPS games, such as Medal of Honor, Halo, or later COD. So I wanted to go to the origins of the Collectathon genre, and I went about familiarizing myself with the design of the first Collectathons and onward, which was a great excuse to finally play Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie along with a few other special games. Using those games as a benchmark, I crafted some tests to find out what games are Collectathons, which isn't a perfect method but is miles better than simply collecting for progress. But I needed some games to try out my tests to see if they worked, and in a moment of genius, one of my first games I thought of to test was a game that certainly does not belong in the genre. No one in their right mind would ever call it a Collectathon. So I began my quest of uncovering what Collectathons really are, and the first step was seeing if Doom 2016 is a Collectathon. In Doom 2016, you will collect Praetor tokens, bobbleheads, guns, power-ups, armor, ammo, health pickups, Argent energy upgrades, grenade types, keycards, and colored skulls. With all these collectibles, I was initially a little baffled how Doom wasn't a Collectathon. I had to really think about Doom in comparison with the old Collectathons to tease out the difference. I thought about it in comparison to Banjo-Kazooie, and the notable difference I found between Doom and Banjo is that 2 of Banjo's collectibles, the notes and jiggies, are required if you want to beat the game. If you do not collect enough, Gruntilda's magic doors or the unfinished paintings will stop you from progressing. So I figured one core aspect of Collectathons is gated progress. Areas won't unlock without collecting enough items. Doom also has two types of collectibles that unlock gated progress though, the colored keycards and the skulls. This made things a little more complicated, so I had to think a bit more about what differentiated Banjo's mandatory collectibles versus Doom's. The first two things I noticed were that Banjo's items stack into a total count and some of the items are optional. For example, the first magic door blocking your way requires a note score of 50 to unlock. Up until that point, you can get 100 notes. So there's a lot of breathing room for missing some. Doom, on the other hand, has what I will call lock and key design. Each color of a keycard or skull is used to unlock specific colored doors, and it has nothing to do with collecting a certain number of keycards. Combining the ideas of mandatory collectibles and a collectible count, I could say with certainty that Doom is not a collectathon. It took a surprising amount of thought to find out why the game about blowing off demon heads isn't a collectathon. If Doom helped me narrow down the basics of a collectathon, I needed to move to a game that would show the difference between a normal platformer versus a collectathon platformer. I couldn't think of a better candidate than Crash Bandicoot 2: Cortex Strikes Back.
Crash Bandicoot 2: Cortex Strikes Back.
From Crash Bandicoot 1 to 2, they added the crystals to progression design.
Crystals. Of course.
There's one crystal per level, and after getting all 5 crystals for each area, you can progress to the next. So they're required for progression and they stack into a total count, which seemed to be like a collectathon. While Crash 2's crystals did feel like a step in the collectathon direction, it never quite seemed the same as something like Spyro or Banjo, and I wasn't sure why. Then, when creating this video, I realized there were 2 problems with Crash 2. The first issue is that the crystals are lock and key design fundamentally. The difference from Doom is 5 crystals are needed to unlock the next area rather than 1 key, but there's still no breathing room for missing the crystals, all 5 are needed. So it's like needing 5 keys instead of 1. For the second issue, I thought of Spyro the Dragon in comparison. In Spyro, all the standard levels will have at least 3 dragons to rescue, but some are allowed to be skipped. In fact, there are quite a lot which can be missed throughout the game. In Crash 2, every single crystal needs to be collected, and in its current state, the crystals are super easy to get, as they're always just in the open. This shifts the focus of the game from exploring to find items to platforming from the start and end of a level. I think Crash 2 highlights the distinction between a platformer with collecting and a platformer about collecting. If a platformer is about collecting like Spyro 1, then there are options so you don't get stuck easily. In Crash 2, there are no options for what to collect, but the collectibles are super easy to get so you don't get stuck and can focus on platforming more. So Crash 2 got me to better understand where the line between a platformer and collectathon is, but I still had one more platformer I needed to examine. Mario 64 also fell off to me because it seemed like the pinnacle of a collectathon, but there's one important detail that destroys the collectathon experience. In Mario 64, when entering a level, you have the freedom to explore the level, but you do not have the freedom to collect. Once getting a star, you get kicked out of a level.
Here we go!
This is like being a kid who is told to pick up your room, but every time you put a toy back, you must run around the house, then you can return to picking up. Is this really picking up, or is this running around? It's kind of hard to tell. Getting kicked out of a level breaks the collecting flow. It makes the levels feel more like separate missions that just so happen to run through the same space rather than a level dedicated to collecting. I think collectathons have to give more freedom than Mario 64 allows. Because you can't stay in a level after getting a star, Mario 64 misses out on a huge part of the collectathon freedom. But it is quite odd because Mario 64 had a ginormous impact on 3D platformers and collectathons alike. Mario 64 was obviously a huge inspiration for Banjo-Kazooie, and in a peculiar sense, I would call Mario 64 the progenitor of the collectathon genre, despite not being within the genre itself. Think of like God creating Adam. God isn't Adam, but yeah, anyway. This conclusion surprised me because it meant a lot of really similar games like Gex 2 or 3 and A Hat in Time are not a collectathon. So after cutting out so many games from the genre, I felt I'd finally gotten a really good grip of what the genre is. So, Doom 2016 showed me that at least one type of collectible needs to be persistent across sections of the game, and these collectibles are counted in a total count. The total count is used to unlock further areas or levels. Crash 2 and Mario 64 showed me each level needs to contain multiple of these collectibles. Some need to be missable, and you shouldn't be kicked out of a level after getting one. And one final thing that is obvious but needs to be said, the collectibles must be finite, so no respawning items, infinite items, or item farming should be allowed in a collectathon. Now that I had an idea of what makes a collectathon work conceptually, I was driven to find out from experience what the genre is, so I played a ton of them. I wanted to extract out the essence of their worlds, collectibles, and other features. So now I will explore the full range of collectathon games, from popular to unpopular, good to second-rate, and edge cases to classics. As a nod to the series which started it all for me, I wanted my first investigation to be the Spyro trilogy. This trilogy is a rich set of games that evolve the collectathon formula a lot from game to game. That is a rare occurrence in any genre, let alone such a niche one, so I will introduce the genre in full with Spyro the Dragon. Spyro the Dragon being the first in a series means it does not shy away from very quirky but distinct design, and the collectibles do not shy away from the quirkiness either. There are 3 types of collectibles used to impress the balloonists: dragons, eggs, and gems. They want certain quotas of items to let Spyro travel to the next world. They will alternate between the 3 collectible types, which is a very odd choice. For comparison, Banjo-Kazooie requires the notes to unlock magic doors in the hub world, Jiggies are used for inserting into paintings that open levels, and Jinjos are to get a Jiggy in a level. These all have specific uses that will never change. Spyro 1, in contrast, feels completely unstructured. I think the goal may have been to prevent harsh progression restrictions, as you need a little more than half the total dragons, a little more than half the available gems, and almost half the eggs. This allows Spyro to sprinkle collectibles everywhere, but it never requires clean sweeping a level, and a decent chunk of levels can even be skipped. There are a few mandatory levels though. In the first world, Artisans, there's a boss level, Toasty, and it is gated behind a giant closed dragon head. The requirements to open the head is, oddly enough, by leaving any other level in the Artisans world via the yellow whirlwind exit. Likewise, in the last world, Nork Nexus, the game also gates progression in the same manner with dragon heads for Twilight Harbor and Nasty Nork. This style of feature crops up in collectathons where you need to complete a level to cash in the collectibles or open up new levels, although it is usually throughout the whole game, unlike Spyro 1. Laughably, Spyro 1 only uses this mechanic for 3 levels, and the rest of the levels only have exits for style points. All in all, Spyro 1 is a very unique flavor for collectathons because of oddities like the whirlwind exits and the eggs, which are an odd collectible. The strange collecting requirements makes it one of the most free collectathons around, with simplistic gameplay as the dressing on top. If nothing else, it set a great framework for its next games to adapt. Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, or Gateway to Glimmer, follows many of the core gameplay aspects of 1, but it puts a small spin on everything. The first change, gems are no longer another item to be counted up, but instead a currency to be spent. One main collectible, Talismans, are lock and key design, and the other main collectible, Orbs, is collectathon style but only has a handful of count requirements throughout the game. NPCs are abundant, with being guides and challenge givers instead of being the main collectible, like the dragons, and there's a main cast of characters too. Levels are massively varied themes, not simply following the homeworld theme. The game also added ability unlocks, which forces a few level replays. And lastly, the game adds bosses to progression. I was massively surprised when examining the game because it sort of spreads out the collectathon parts in weird ways. The first time orbs are needed is halfway through the second homeworld Autumn Plains to open a gate. The last boss also needs 40 of the 60 total orbs to unlock, which makes only 2 occasions where orbs are necessary. The talismans, on the other hand, show up once per level at the end, and they're used to unlock 2 of the boss fights at the end of the first 2 worlds. You also need every one of them from every level per lock and key design. The last world ditches talisman requirements and instead wants you to get orbs. The levels Aquaria Towers, Shady Oasis, and Zephyr are locked by moneybags for a gem toll. Moneybags also blocks progression mid-level on 4 occasions where you need to pay an amount to get to the end of the level. The last thing gems buy is the abilities Swimming, Climbing, and Head Bashing, which are used for further progress into hub worlds and levels. Really, gems are more important than orbs overall, which is a pretty funny change-up, although dragons getting treasure is a standard trope, so maybe it makes more sense this way. With all the odd additions and changes to collectibles in Spyro 2, it makes it feel like a more creative but messy game, and this is in stark contrast to the next game, Spyro 3: Year of the Dragon. Spyro 3 definitely feels more considered and structured. It changed progression from Spyro 2 while keeping most of the general ideas intact. This time around, you will need to play every main level, but instead of giving an item like the talismans, the character at the end of the level will give an egg, which streamlines the collectibles down to eggs as the main collectible and then also the gems. But there's still a mandatory element to every level. Once getting to the end of a level, the character will go back to the hub world, and once you round up all the characters from every level, you can progress to the next world. Now the eggs, on the other hand, are what opens up new levels. Every hub will have 2 levels that are freebies, you don't need any eggs, but then all the other levels will require a certain egg count for you to unlock them and continue progressing throughout the game. I like this because it gives some leniency when entering a new hub world. You don't have to return to the old one to go collect eggs, but you'll have 2 free levels to collect some eggs and potentially unlock those extra levels. Moneybags has returned to block progression within levels, same as Spyro 2. Likewise, Spyro 3 keeps a version of the Moneybags level unlocks where you unlock a new character instead, who will then play through that level. Finally, the end boss does require 100 eggs to fight and finish the game, which caps out at a nice round number, I'd say. If the Spyro series felt a bit haphazard with 1 and 2, 3 narrows down to a pure systemic approach, which I think makes for a natural evolution and end of the original series. Each game in the series has its own distinct identity. Spyro 1's simplistic quirkiness, Spyro 2's adventurous, messy structure, and Spyro 3's disciplined systems. As I thought about these games, they didn't only tell me about the series, but gave philosophies on how to make a collectathon. Each holds something unique that adds rich depth to the genre. If Spyro is a series of deep genre exploration, then Banjo-Kazooie is something like the scaffolding upon which all collectathons are built, or it at least came first. Due to this, I have already and will continue to use Banjo-Kazooie as the benchmark for collectathon design, so it will be explored more in later portions. For now, I want to take a quick detour to show one unique aspect of Banjo that stood out to me when playing it. Banjo has a collectible exchange rather than a collectible accrual. So Banjo uses the Jiggies as puzzle pieces to open new levels by inserting them into a picture, and this uses the collectibles up permanently. A lot of the other collectathons will sort of pretend to use up the main collectibles, like Mario Odyssey, which puts the moons into the ship sail. But the ship's sail keeps the count rather than using them up, per se. Sort of like cashing them into your total loot. Spyro 2 and 3 will give the gems back at the end, so it only temporarily takes them away even though they seem like an exchange. There's a strange difference between collectibles needed just for the count and the collectibles needed as a function within the world or currency where they leave your inventory. This is a rareware / Platonics classic, as Banjo 2, DK64, and Yooka-Laylee do the same thing with some of their collectibles. The collectibles being exchanged can really make the game have a different feel rather than having a lump sum like the dragon and its treasure. Instead, it can feel like scrounging around for a few powerful items so you can progress and start the search again. It is the exact same function, but a very different feel. Bugs Bunny Lost in Time surprised me with how strangely it treats its level design and collectibles. Firstly, the collectibles. The game has clocks as the main collectible, and it becomes quite strict to unlock levels. There are 3 bonus levels that require golden carrots, and they're optional. These are 3 extra clocks you can get. This is important because the game has little room for error with 120 of 124 clocks needed. Therefore, if you miss the bonus levels, you can only miss 1 clock total. The last collectibles are carrots, which replenish and are everywhere. You'll need to trade in 99 of them to unlock 1 golden carrot in each hub level. This means they are effectively useless because you need hundreds of golden carrots to unlock a bonus level. So these collectibles create minimal error when exploring levels. But oddly enough, some of the levels have no exploration at all. The game varies from linear platformer to open-ended levels with a second playthrough for abilities, to bosses, to linear vehicle sections, to puzzle gauntlets, to scavenger hunts with a boss at the end. I never really knew what I was going to get, and if the collectibles didn't act as a great motivator to explore naturally, I think the creative levels picked up some of that slack. They helped make me curious on what kind of level is next. I think this is probably made better if you are familiar with Looney Tunes and all the classic set pieces. With all this in mind, Lost in Time is a collectathon, but I would say it feels haphazard and experimental with the strict collectibles and level variety. It doesn't quite have a tight relationship between level design and collectibles, making a cohesive game like Banjo or Spyro. Duck Dodgers starring Daffy Duck. Well, this game was not even slightly enjoyable to play. So I want to jump in, talk about the collectibles, and wipe my brain clean of this experience. I didn't finish this one, FYI. So the game starts by dumping you on a planet, then it will have a few paths of rooms you can go through with platforming and puzzle challenges. Each room you enter will load a new small area, and it will tell you how many atoms are in there. This is usually 1 to 2. Then after collecting some atoms, you will sooner or later find the boss gate, which needs some atoms to unlock. So when going to World 2, the atom count resets to 0, and you will need to get 12 in that world to enter the final Mafia boss level. Funnily enough, Mario Odyssey uses the same structure when progressing through the game. The only difference is after finishing the game, it changes to a lump sum count to unlock the final extra stages. But this begs the question, is the game a collectathon because the item count isn't persistent across all the hub worlds? I'd say yes, because it is just about having some total counts for progression. It doesn't need to be 1 total count through the entire game necessarily. So Duck Dodgers starring Daffy Duck is a collectathon, like Super Mario Odyssey. That's a comparison I never thought I'd make. SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, while a great collectathon, I feel it has the best showcase of the different type of collectibles a collectathon can offer. A quick rundown. It has levels unlocked by golden spatulas. Socks are a sub-collectible to trade in for more golden spatulas, similar to the Jinjos in Banjo or Mario Sunshine's blue coins. It has shiny objects everywhere. That is the name of the item, shiny objects, by the way, which are used as currency to access more areas by paying clams, similar to money bags in Spyro. And the money can be traded in to get more golden spatulas from Mr. Krabs. I will call these collectibles the big, medium, and small collectible structure between the spatulas, socks, and shiny things. I feel many collectathons struggle to implement all these types of collectibles well, but many still try the structure. Once I noticed the structure, I felt it was hard not to see how games tend to make all the collectibles all turn into the big items or just stumble. Spyro 1 feels like a stumble with the weird eggs. They feel like a medium collectible, but don't appear past the magic crafters. They could make the thieves hold gems and it would change nothing effectively. Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy, has a different type of implementation, as the small and medium collectibles, the Precursor Orbs and Scoutflies, just translate directly to the large collectibles, the Power Cells. I think the missed potential is with the Precursor Orbs being so iconic, but there are quite a few useless ones when getting 100%. I think it would have been great to have something extra for them to do. I like Rocket Robot on Wheel's use of mid collectibles, as they are machine parts that unlock an extra section of the level. This is a cool adaptation, but on the other side, the small collectibles, Tinker tokens, are all required to get a ticket, the big collectible. This is strict and it can be very frustrating wandering around looking for one token with low draw distances. Toy Story 2 for PS1 takes a fine, balanced approach where small and medium collectibles get traded for the large. This one feels better because there are more coins around than the requirement. The coin counts are isolated to the level, and will reset when dying or leaving and coming back. The total resetting on death creates some tension, and since there are more than enough, it doesn't feel too tedious as you don't need to explore every nook and cranny every time. Rather than having a ton of extra useless collectibles or being strict, Toy Story 2 has a tight design where every item feels purposeful without being wasted. I don't think every game in the genre needs to have a big, medium, and small structure for collectibles. It does make for a nice, simple pattern which suits the ease and satisfaction of collecting items, though. That being said, having satisfying collectibles with clear purpose seems to be the goal regardless of the structure used. Rocket Robot on Wheels is the first outlier that throws a curveball. Rocket Robot has 12 tickets per level, which are the main collectible needed to access more levels. Simple enough, but the complex part is the endgame. After defeating the last boss, you are told by the professor that you need to get everything to open the park back up. The game lets you finish it without collecting everything, but it doesn't give you the proper ending. This is similar to Jak and Daxter, except I'd say the ending for getting everything is just an extra detail in Jak and Daxter. The story still finishes without getting it all. Rocket doesn't. I would still call this a collectathon because the collectibles are about accessing new areas and not getting ending cutscenes. I played the demo for Fez once on my PS Vita like a decade ago, and I never thought it would be in this genre. So this game demanded me to talk about mixing genres. In essence, the game plays like a 2D puzzle platformer, but in mechanics, it shares a lot with the Collectathon genre. Let me lay it out. The progress follows a standard Collectathon style, where after the first 2 progression doors, you have a lot of freedom to collect in the branching 2.5D world. There are plenty of cubes to go around, so you can get the ones you want and move on when it suits you. The major point of interest with Fez is whether the anti-cubes are considered part of standard Collectathon progression. The anti-cubes are not required to beat the standard game and are like extra challenge puzzles that can be skipped completely. They range from fairly simple observation skills to decoding languages hidden around the game world. While a lot may not be found nor understood on the average first playthrough, I still think they are valid as collectibles. They do open the locked doors too. In a simple logical manner, the anti-cubes didn't seem to violate any Collectathon rules. But in application, the puzzle styles and expectation shifts the way they may feel. Then genres come into play. And a lot of the game could fall into more of a puzzle territory, so it would be a puzzle game. But here's where the complexity comes in. Because Banjo-Kazooie has puzzles too, some of which are about the same complexity as Fez. So is Banjo a puzzle game too? It does have a focus on puzzles. This point really shows how quickly genres can break down and how hard it is to get a pure version of something. I think Fez is a collectathon, but I would also consider it a puzzle platformer as well. Quite frankly, I cannot explain that difference on a mechanical level. But I think this shows that tone, graphics, and slight shifts in gameplay can change the feeling of a game genre, even if the mechanics line up with the genre in theory. So, all things considered, Fez is in this unique, interesting middle point where it's both a collectathon and a puzzle platformer. I'd probably put it more in puzzle platformer, but it's in this video, so it's a collectathon too, I guess. Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair is a strange one because the game is functionally a collectathon for most players, while technically not requiring any collectibles to finish it. Along with this, it is a 2D game, which puts another odd spin on things. In Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, right from the beginning, you are allowed to enter and play the final level. The catch is that there are 3 checkpoints, no extra hits, and the level is insanely hard. The level is also about 25 or so minutes long, so the game heavily incentivizes new players to play through the hub world, find all the levels, which at the end have bees to collect, and those will give you one extra hit for the final level. Along with this, each level contains 5 twit coins, which are needed to pay for the paywalls.
The paywalls simply block further progress in the hub.
With the twit coins in mind, you can see how this would be a collectathon for most players. If it were a proper collectathon, which it is pragmatically, although technically it isn't. You could just beat the game by playing the final level right from the start. So in Pac-Man World and Rayman 1, they flip a few of the collectathon conventions on their head, perhaps with the makings of a new genre. Starting with Pac-Man World, it follows a very standard progression. As you beat each level, you unlock the next. As you play, you may find keys and find a cage Pac friend to unlock with the key. If not, you will finish the last standard level and find out you need to free all the Pac people to fight the final boss, Pac-Man. At this point, the player will need to re-explore every theme type to find the Pac person caged in that world, and this requires searching the level to find both the keys and cages. It starts by not communicating anything about the collectibles. Then it says, all right, go back and explore the game if you weren't paying attention. I can imagine this being a very frustrating experience for those who may have ignored the keys and cages, but in my experience with the game, I was already trying to collect everything to get lives, and I had 4 or 5 cages unlocked by the time I reached Pac-Man. Rayman 1, on the other hand, doesn't really incentivize collecting the Electoons, which funnily enough are in cages too, and you need to collect them all to access the last level. The game also doesn't really tell you that until the end. This time it is a little easier to know where to go, as the levels tell you how many Electoons are rescued so you aren't in the dark. I think this type of design felt more organic in Pac-Man World because the cages and keys felt like this secret you were finding as you were playing through the levels. In Rayman 1, it feels a little out of left field because the Electoons are just everywhere. You're going to be finding plenty of them, but you don't really know why you're collecting them. Overall, these two games have this weird style where they flip the collecting on its head and only inform you about the items and expect you to collect them at the end. So I suppose I will call this the reverse collectathon. The reverse collectathon structure is to load up the collectible progression requirements at the end to get access to the last world or level, or get the credits maybe. I suppose it is a little loose because I have only found 2 examples, so it's really hard to flesh out. Now, I suppose there's a difficult question which needs to be answered, and that is, wouldn't these games just be lock and key design like talked about with Doom and Crash Bandicoot? Well, yeah, technically. I suppose the thing I'm interested in is there a reverse collectathon that exists out there in the wild? Is there a game that doesn't require all the collectibles, but it also doesn't tell you that you need them until the very end? I don't know, it's all kind of messy, and I just really felt like throwing these games in here because they're such an odd design. But yeah, if anybody knows of reverse collectathons in the wild, let me know in the comments. Balen Wonderland is I'm just kidding. I'm not wasting my money or time on this one. I was hoping I didn't have to play any Sonic games, but this happened. So, Sonic Unleashed came out for PS2, Wii, Xbox 360, and PS3. The Xbox and PS3 versions are a collectathon requiring Sun and Moon tokens to keep progressing. The Wii and PS2 versions are not, as the tokens are just given at the end of levels. There's no collecting happening. I looked up gameplay and I have no interest in playing the PS3 or Xbox versions, but it was just such an oddity that I wanted to bring it up. So, sorry Sonic fans. I'm not talking about Sonic anymore. If collectibles are the golden butter of the genre, then the levels and worlds are the bread they are spread upon. As much as it can be great to just collect shiny things, I begin to realize there is a lot more to a collectathon than collecting items. In hindsight, it is clear that level and world layouts are what really distinguishes each collectathon as a unique experience. While I was initially interested in the collectibles, once combining them with world design and movesets, that is where the individuality and creativity of the Collectathons shine. So I wanted to take a step back and really think about how the worlds allow those collectibles to shine. Spyro 1's level design always had this very special aspect that I have felt few games in the genre have nailed quite the same way. Spyro 1 levels feel fairly compact, but they tend to have a very specific type of design to their structure that makes all the levels unique in layout. Stonehill has 2 circles enclosed with a hill wrapping around them. Then there's the beach off the edge for a bit more personality. This allows for an unraveling type of level where you start in the bowl and get to find out how to get up to the hill. Another level, Cliff Town, is designed with a town that has a cliff to the left. You start by traversing the town and then have the opportunity to explore further with the cliff overlooking everything. The town allows for simple progression to the end of the level, but then the far out cliff beckons you to explore further. Dark Passage has a winding upward design with parts that overlook others, and it creates the opportunities to look down and find secrets. All these level structures have this very unique element where they always feel like they're prompting you to fully immerse yourself in level layout, to really squeeze out all the hidden collectibles around. And on the flip side, they tend to offer you the level ending early, allowing you to move on if the level isn't interesting. So overall, I think Spyro's levels feel like they're asking for more out of the player, almost like a slow invite for you to get everything if you're up for the challenge. Anyone who can remember looking for the final secrets in Dry Canyon, Wizard Peak, Treetops, or Haunted Towers knows what a challenging experience that can be. Due to the lack of minigames, the game is a focused and free collectathon, making it one of the greats in the genre that has nothing for comparison. I can still remember my first time playing Spyro 2, and it felt very adventurous. The hub worlds in Spyro 2 have always impressed me. They're significantly larger with only 3 total, and each having gated sections by an ability unlock. The second hub, Autumn Plains, is also effectively 2 hubs mashed together with its large size, and is by far the most memorable hub I've experienced, with the ascent up the castle and the secret of flying down. The hubs in Spyro 2 are chocked full of content with characters, platforming challenges, and secrets. I feel this gives the hubs lots of character. On the flip side, the levels of Spyro 2 have a far more focused feel due to the talismans, because you will always need to get to the end to collect one. This means the levels can focus on an intended path through the level and even interweave a story. Then there are all these fun extra stories and challenges if you want to go the extra mile and get more orbs and gems too. All in all, Spyro 2 feels like it is aimed at giving a narrative experience, and the levels are designed to give that. The talismans are always attached to the main story of the level, and the orbs are always connected to a side story of some kind. I think this narrative focus is why it felt so adventurous to me as a kid on my first experience. So Spyro Year of the Dragon is Dark Souls. Yep, you heard it here first. So every standard level always loops back to the beginning with a shortcut, and the shortcut stays around if you return to the level, allowing for easier gem clean sweeps if you miss something. While obviously shortcuts are not new to Spyro 3, this is definitely a clever design choice, and strangely enough is a small observation that snowballed into the creation of this video, so I feel it's worth mentioning. The shortcut designs are also really clever, and they use a huge variety throughout the game. One is a ski lift, there's bridges that extend, there's a wall that gets blown up, there's hidden doors that open. There's all kinds of things that are used for these shortcuts, more than just a door. Spyro 3 also has a highly experimental level. Enchanted Towers is a level where Sergeant Bird and Spyro can be played in the same space, which is really interesting considering their difference of abilities. This would have been something really cool to see explored further, but yeah, I don't really think we need more Spyro games. Due to the shortcut, Spyro 3 has a very tight level design that fits perfectly with the Spyro experience. Say it is the final refinement of the Spyro formula that still doesn't feel topped to this day, really. Banjo-Kazooie was a great comparison for me when playing it for this video. It opts for bigger open spaces, and this is accentuated by the level start also being the level exit. So the game puts you on a level with no end goal, just your own curiosity, which fits perfectly with the large open spaces. From there, the game puts lots of landmarks around that break the levels into distinct parts. For example, in Mumbo's Mountain, you have the first contact of the level, the area above with Mumbo and the huts, the termite hill, the stone ritual site, the mean monkey, and the bull. This is very different from something like Spyro, where the levels tend to be more linear with a flow into a direction, which doesn't need a lot of distinct landmarks. In my experience, it allowed the landmarks to really stand out and to help me build up a mental layout of the level. Because of the landmarks, the jiggies can be understood on an intuitive level as well. Most landmarks will have some jiggy found around by exploring, solving a puzzle or challenge. This means if I saw a landmark, I could know there's at least one item to collect. The levels also have the witch switch that puts a jiggy somewhere near the level entrance in the hub, which is a strange continuity between the levels and the hub that is not seen too often in these types of games, really not seen at all. Usually levels do not affect the hub at all. Speaking of the hub, it has an interesting sort of linear structure with a lot of secrets and dead ends branching off. I feel it creates this sort of like long puzzle you slowly piece together as you play, with the hardest puzzle being how to access the areas after the Mad Monster Mansion. Banjo leans hard into open levels with freedom and landmarks to help keep oriented. The collectibles really converge onto the level design, with jiggies or jinjos being around the landmarks and notes being around to guide points of interest. As a whole, I think Banjo is a masterclass of open level design, which provokes the player to explore through open curiosity. It's honestly a type of design I would love to see implemented more in open world games these days. Like I mentioned before, Bugs Bunny Lost in Time uses a hodgepodge of level designs. The first level shows off a standard linear level with slight detours containing clocks, and then it follows it up with a short boss level that awards a clock as well. The next level has these Acme boxes, which Merlin, the game's guide, informed you to smash 10 for a clock. Clocks are also hidden around the linear path, and it has a boss at the end which awards a clock too. There's also a skiing level with one clock at the end, a car chase level with clocks scattered throughout the track, and a few levels that are non-linear with a few branching pathways, such as What's Cooking Dock or Carrot Henge Mystery, both in the medieval period. It seems like the designers really wanted to try a lot with Lost in Time, and I find that commendable along with being part of the charm of the game. It also goes to show that Collectathons don't need to follow a specific level design style and can really just do whatever. The only issue is in the execution of some of those levels. Rayman Legends is a 2D game with pretty linear level design. Despite the linearity, the game still has well-realized secrets and collecting that I find to be quite enjoyable. The main collectibles, teensies, are in side areas, hidden nooks and crannies, or challenge rooms. Most of these are off the beaten path just a little, so it goes to show that you don't need a large open area like Banjo-Kazooie to have a collectathon. Instead, you can choose the nook and cranny approach. This is similar to how Lost in Time chooses to structure some of its more linear 3D levels, so it isn't even relegated to just 3D. Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair is another game which takes the same nook and cranny approach with the Twit coins. I think Rayman Legends is a great example of a 2D game with short linear levels with momentum that still keeps the focus on collecting for progression. I feel it would be a shame to overlook it, even if it does have more 2D platformer DNA than Collectathon. Jak and Daxter and the Precursor Legacy, despite its age, is technically impressive, featuring no loading screens between levels. There are still obvious choke points for loading, but it makes for a unique exploration experience when transitioning from the hubs to the levels. The levels take varied approaches with layout, some being fairly linear, like the Boggy Swamp in the Lost Precursor City, or more open-ended, like Sentinel Beach and Precursor Basin. It feels a little bit like Spyro 1. The levels are a place well realized first, then a level second, is one way to put it. The fact there are no load screens really makes the levels flow together to make a more cohesive world that doesn't have boundaries, and I think that hits on a similar feeling to Banjo 1 as well. It feels like the world is begging you to just immerse yourself in the locations and world and look around in order to find stuff. Overall, the game has an unbroken immersive exploration paired with the need to collect, and I think those combine to make a unique Collectathon experience that's not really like anything else. Man, I have waited a long time to talk about Donkey Kong 64. I feel like this game gets a bad rap that it doesn't deserve. So, Donkey Kong 64 is one of the more bland level experiences for me, but I think it is to hold the weight of the 5 characters. And this is why I've waited so long into the video to talk about the game. Let me explain. I would largely describe the levels as mid-sized hallways connected to larger circles or boxes, repeat a few times and you have a DK64 level. I think this would strictly feel like a downgrade when considering it came from the same folks as Banjo, but then the Kong swapping comes into play, and imagine scouring a Banjo-sized level 5 times for every Kong's collectibles. If DK64 had Banjo-sized levels, I think it would be simply ridiculous. So these seemingly bland map sections are used to facilitate the gameplay loop of multiple Kongs walking through picking things up. This also means you can pack the items into a small space, which makes for less walking. So this game is really a unique example of how to manage a large amount of collectibles with multiple characters by making levels relatively simple. I think this contrasts and compares well with Spyro 3's Enchanted Towers level. The level doesn't hold the same looping design as the rest of the game and has spaced out towers and islands to facilitate both Sergeant Bird and Spyro's moveset. It shows that levels need to be considered in context of the gameplay and collectibles. Given Donkey Kong's very raw collecting experience of walking around and swapping a ton to get everything, I think the levels serve their purpose well, being small sections surrounding the swap barrels. In that sense, I think the levels do a decent job of getting the player right into the meat of grabbing everything and swapping. This really shows that small, simple level design can be a good option and not every Collectathon needs to have a Jak and Daxter world design. I heard a lot about DK64 before playing it, namely the swap barrels are annoying and there are too many collectibles. Having played it for the first time for this video, I think people severely misunderstand the game's design. Given the idea of the swap barrel, I think the game executes it very well on its ideas. I think there is a reason why no one has attempted the style of game since, because it's pretty much been done the best it can be with DK64. Level and world design is an endlessly fascinating topic to me, and they really shape the game's focus and feel. If the collectibles are the butter, then the worlds really can be any flavor of bread. But bread and butter analogies aside, there are still other parts that make up a collectathon.
Trouble with the trolley, eh?
So one sore spot for me when playing through these collectathons is that they have a strange relationship with minigames. All the way from Spyro with tanks, Banjo with bird guns, Donkey Kong with fly swatting. Some of the challenges are complete garbage, some are fun, but before I could even begin thinking about these, one question haunted me. What even is a minigame? This may seem obvious on the face of it, but it is surprisingly hard to explain. After all, some minigames use vehicles, some use different characters, some even use the main moveset. Are these all minigames or just some, and what makes them different from the normal collecting? So I needed to figure out what a minigame is. So in Spyro 1, on a new save, you will start up and see a dragon frozen right in front of you. All you need to do is move forward to free him. If I break that moment down, I would call it a test, even if it is testing the most basic action, walking. There is also this notorious minigame in Spyro 2 called Trouble with the Trolley, where you get on this rail cart train track thing with a cannon, have to shoot some stuff on the track. Now, if I contrast Trouble with the Trolley and freeing that first dragon, in Spyro 2, the challenge is initiated by talking with the bird NPC and then being told what to do. So a huge distinction shows up, where one is an unspoken and undirected challenge, and the other is directed by the bird with instructions. Another interesting example is something like Yooka-Laylee, because it shows another layer. Sometimes the game will have a button that you can slam. After hitting it, it will pan the camera to a pagey in a cage, then pop up with a timer. This challenge is directing you not so subtly to get the pagey in time. This type of challenge is unspoken, but still directed by the camera and level obstacles. So I think minigames are a challenge that is directed and or spoken. Usually an NPC or some other guidance will be around to tell you what to do. And this guidance won't be general guidance about how to collect all the jiggies or defeat enemies in the area.
Press the jump button twice to glide.
It has to be guidance about that specific challenge to get an item. So something like a tutorial about how to play the game isn't a specific directed challenge, instead being general guidance. From there, the minigames can use the main moveset, a different vehicle, character, or any odd assortment of gameplay styles, like fly swatters. So if there's a specific guidance for the challenge, it is a minigame. If there's no specific guidance, it is just a regular gameplay challenge or regular gameplay. So with a clear definition and an idea of what a minigame was, I wanted to look at the quality of them and see what made them good or bad, or just other things that stuck out to me. I wanted to set a base floor with challenges. What is the bottom tier? Well, DK64 challenges are often terrible, and I could think of 2 reasons why. 1, they repeat often with no changes. What is the point of a challenge if it is just going to get repeated? 2nd, some like the squirrel herding are too difficult in comparison to everything else going on. It is one thing to expect me to adjust to a new moveset and strategy, and something else entirely to make it hard right off the bat. I thought Spyro games do a decent job at this with the speedway levels, where they are usually pretty easy for the first time so you can get a feel, then the next ones attempt to move the difficulty up a little. It also would be ridiculous if every Spyro speedway was the same level on repeat, which is kind of what DK64 does, just in smaller gameplay bites. So minigames that repeat unnecessarily or that are insanely difficult are a good baseline for how not to make a minigame. And this isn't to say that these types of minigames may not be enjoyable to some, but when put into a game about collecting, it can be jarring to deal with the difficulty spike. Vehicles are a common type of minigame in collectathons, but I feel they can often lead to the most dreaded challenges. Some of my least favorite have been the tank level in Spyro 3, or any of them in Enter the Dragonfly, the vehicle level in Bugs Lost in Time, and all the retro games in Yooka-Laylee. I think why they are so dreadful is because they're either too long or too complex for their own good. It seems like the devs for collectathons tend to make the vehicle/gameplay change sections more complex than necessary, but at that point you might as well make a game dedicated to that type of gameplay. On the other side, something like Bugs Lost in Time dedicates an entire level to these horrible slow vehicles that force you to redo large chunks when messing up. Something like Spyro 2's Manta Ray or Banjo 2's Minecart section would be nice, short, and simple vehicle minigames that feel suitable for the genre. So vehicle minigames should have the short and simple aspect to make sure they flow without breaking up the pace of getting back to the collecting. Timers are a fun little thing to spice up regular gameplay while still having a minigame. When collectathons generally have easier platforming, I think timers can be a really fun way to stress the precision a little more so you have less room for mistakes. The issue can crop up again when the restart time or overall course time gets to be too long. Take for instance this flying section in Yooka-Laylee, where the time it takes to get through the course and get back can just feel a little grating overall if you fail too many times. But overall, small time challenges feel like a simple and great way to stress test players without needing to learn new controls. I think extra characters can be the most pivotal implementation in a game. An extra character type that is fun can add an insane variety and enjoyment to the gameplay loop.
Or become the worst slog ever.
The reason why they are so powerful is because they contain more gameplay than the minigames. A new character can carry enjoyment through entire levels while still being focused on collecting and also spicing up the gameplay. But this is assuming they are well made and have a good moveset. Otherwise, a new character just became the worst part of a collectathon. Imagine if in Banjo 1 the transformations were needed for more than half a level. In their current form, they're okay because they're only useful for a few puzzles or minigames. You don't have to play them very long. If they were used for more, this would make for an incredible downgrade in gameplay because of how little complexity there is just with like a jump or a bite, for instance. Or in the walrus's case, just jump. Whereas with Banjo, there are a dozen or so moves and actions that can be done at any given time. So extra characters are a powerful tool for better or for worse that can be far superior to a simple minigame. But if a minigame sucks, at least it will be short. An extra character may not have that luxury.
Collectathons have had a lot of gameplay variety throughout the years, and I haven't even scraped the surface here. There are also puzzles, mini-bosses, combat challenges, and plenty more. But I think the one thing I found which applies across the board is to make sure the minigames are just breaks from the main gameplay loop, as pure collecting and exploring can get tiring. Stopping to do a relatively simple task like ramming turtles can be a nice break to spice up the gameplay. I think that is really what the challenges are as a whole, some spice. It shouldn't be confused for the whole meal. When playing through Banjo, there was a point in time where I died in Click Clock Woods having only 4 notes left. This was a frustrating experience because if you don't know, Click Clock Woods is basically 4 levels in one. It has this time change mechanic where you'll go through the same area change somewhat from season to season. This got me thinking about difficulty, or said another way, how much friction should a collectathon have? This video is primarily focused on what collectathons are rather than what they should or could be. It is easy enough to say a game can be as hard or easy as it wants, but another thing entirely to ask what serves the experience well. With collectathons, most of them are pretty easy with a few spikes of difficulty here and there. It is particularly interesting that some are hard because of the main platforming gameplay, but others can be hard because of minigames or puzzles. The main issue I see here is that a platformer probably just shouldn't be hard due to the combat. Heck, platformers sort of tried this in the early 2000s and it never really worked out well. It is easy to see why a collectathon platformer is about collecting and platforming, not combat. I certainly don't want to play Devil May Collect. Now, I think the platforming puzzles or minigames could be hard, but if any of these start to overshadow the collecting, then this seems like a bad direction, at least on paper. Think about it. In Spyro or Banjo, you are getting a note or gem or jiggy or dragon every minute to 30 seconds, or so, max. Whenever a difficulty spike hits, this is going to cause the collecting to stop abruptly. If collecting stops, then it can feel contrary to the design of the game and stop that slow drip of item collecting you have gotten used to. Collectathons can get away with hard parts by allowing you to go elsewhere if stuck. And many of them use this technique. This is the benefit of having lower count requirements, so players can skip more items or challenges that are too hard. Bugs Bunny Lost in Time would have benefited from this. So even if a collectathon is really hard, there are ways to make this work within the genre. I feel what I've said here shows why they tend towards the easier difficulty though. Now, my death in Banjo wasn't only frustrating due to being hard, but because of Tedium. In the original Banjo, when dying or leaving a level, the notes reset, so you need to get all 100 in one go. If anyone is planning to make a collectathon, I would seriously consider the amount of collectibles and the tedium to collect them, so you don't run into this type of issue. Like imagine a game where there is a collectible every foot or so on every surface. This turns into a mower simulator, not a collectathon. So collectibles need enough scarcity so they aren't a chore to get. But another factor is consistency. If a game is changing the amount of collectibles and collectible density often, it can feel like whiplash. This is really what happened in Banjo. In any other level, recollecting the notes wouldn't have been that hard, but Click Clock Woods was about 4 times more tedious because of the time change mechanic. So what is the right amount of friction anyway? Did I even answer the question? While it is not a one-size-fits-all, the friction should serve the type of collecting in the game. And I would also say if you're planning on making a collectathon, there's a good reason I think that they're usually pretty easy. I think that's a good starting point. So there's one major thing I realized through this journey of collectathons. The artistry has these dual qualities to it. One is to make a game where it encourages you to explore and understand the world and levels, and 2, it always allows you to tap out if you want. You can move on after getting past those count thresholds and keep experiencing the worlds at your own pace. This feeds right into encouraging those curious kids such as myself to find out what is in Nasty's loot or behind that painting in Grunty's castle. These games had a natural way of drawing curiosity all the way until the end of the game, and if you were still curious, you could go the extra mile. Maybe it was that 100% mark, or the level visuals and tone, enjoying the ride of variety and intrigue, or looking for the next platforming challenges. There are a lot of different motivations for enjoying these games, and I think that really speaks to the strength of the genre, really holding space for those motivations through freedom. Even then, so many of the games in the genre can lean into those different facets due to the flexibility. And I think this shows just the sheer variety that I've just dipped into a little bit here in this video. All in all, the Collectathon genre is flexible enough that it can hold all these different motivations in one and put it in this complete package. I think that is one of the things that really drew me to this genre, to really look at it and pay attention to what it was doing that was different. Throughout this video, I have shown a lot of different collectathons, and many of these games may not even be a collectathon really. You may be surprised to hear that at this point in the video. After all, I spent so much time defining and exploring the genre. Genres are a tricky subject though, and defining a genre like collectathons cleanly is a feat. Genres can be understood from two aspects, one being mechanics and the other being feelings. Mechanics cannot guarantee a certain feeling, only attempt to create it for as many people as possible. For instance, collecting jiggies in Banjo, it may feel like a liberating adventure or a boring chore depending on who you are and when you play it. The mechanic doesn't always give the developer's intended feeling. This video is an attempt to ground the collectathon in measurable mechanics, such as count requirements, but this doesn't guarantee a game will feel like a collectathon for you. Just because Rayman Legends or Fez have the count requirement mechanic in common, some of you probably scoff at the idea of them being a collectathon because they just don't feel like it. And I can respect that. But the goal here is to define, which means I have to disregard a lot of feelings I have too, and respect the process. At this point, no one has put the genre on full display as consistently as I have, and I think that is because no one follows through the definition to its natural conclusion. So for better or worse, that is what I have done. Feelings are not useless though. There is a core essence I can narrow down to. So taking the mechanics and speculating a bit about the intended feelings and wrapping it up can give a glimpse into the core of the collectathon genre. The collectathon is an experience aimed at exploring to collect, but that collecting leads to uncovering the secrets, hidden spots, or cozy areas of a world at your own pace. You can pick your moods of choice, whether it be clean sweep collecting, soaking in the music and visuals, or having fun with the movement and challenges. Collectathons are about exploring a world at your own pace and mood. Collecting items is an excuse so you can vibe how you want. But if the genre is really about vibing through a world, then maybe Doom was a collectathon all along? Hey there, thanks for watching the video and getting to the end. I'm a little sick right now, so don't mind my voice just kind of being not all present, but yeah, pretty cool you got to the end. And shout out to the 1,000 subs who got me monetized from the previous video. As of this video going up, you guys are pretty cool for getting me monetized so quickly, so appreciate it. On a different note, channel support. So I went ahead and I made a coffee link. I'm kind of curious to see how many people think this kind of thing is valuable, and if you do, you can go ahead and, give some support there. And similarly, my wife went ahead and made some Spyro Crochet Plushies to go along with this video's theme. And so she has an Etsy shop that I'll be linking as well. And there's some other stuff on there if you have a wife or a girlfriend who's interested. There's some other woman stuff on there or whatever. And yeah, just on a final note, I want to be clear that this channel is directed by my interests, so I wouldn't want anybody to stick around with the expectations that I'll be doing more Collectathon videos or Dark Souls videos. Those aren't necessarily in my near future anytime soon. So fair warning on that front. I'll just be kind of doing whatever I think is fun, and yeah. So thanks again for watching, and have a good day.